Welcome to Behind Closed Books, the podcast where business owners and experts reveal the financial decisions that shape their success. Each episode brings you unscripted stories of turning points, hard calls, and the numbers that changed everything to pivot, recover, and grow. If you're building a business and ready to think differently about profit, pressure, and progress, behind every smart decision is a story worth telling. This is the show. Here is your host, Craig Sheets.
Hello, everybody. It's past Happy New Year, so we'll just say welcome to another episode of Behind Closed Books. My next guest today, wow, I mean, we're going to be on a lot of topics. I'm really excited. We're going to go from the gamut. He has a fascinating journey through business and life. He's trained as a chemist, and jokingly or for real, I'm not sure which, we'll find out today, was the first person apparently to freeze dry beer. So that's going to be an exciting topic to talk about. He then transitioned over to marketing and went into sales. He's developed a methodology for effective software demonstrations and discovery conversations, which isn't something you think about very often, but it's really important. And we're going to learn more about that today. And that led him to founding, his company. And we'll hear more about that journey. He's been in business for over 25 years. He works with a series of vendor partners. His approach to business emphasizes the importance of understanding the buyer's process. So you got to think of it from that way, from the buyer's process. And a lot of people don't look at it from that perspective, and how to map it to better what he refers to catchphrase-wise as buyer enablement, rather than following the vendor's sales process. He puts a large focus on the role of storytelling in business. Not a lot of people think of storytelling when it comes to business, so this will be exciting to hear about how that works. He volunteers now in the medical field and facilitates accelerating drug discovery to further research, and how they say is maximize good for maximum people, or maximize good for maximizing the people. He'll say it better than I can. He's more well-versed in that in the pharmaceutical world. When he's not working, he loves to watch sunsets, as we all love to, but he's in a great spot to watch that. He loves nature and walking, reading to learn, which, most people sometimes don't do that, but that's great. He does that. He loves history, loves to learn how things work. He reads comics first thing in the mornings. That's got to be great. With that, everybody, meet my next guest, Peter Cohan. Welcome to Behind Closed Books, Peter.
Truly a pleasure to join.
There is going to be a lot of topics today. I thought I'd kind of go over a high level of the topics we'll talk about, and then get right into the different ideas today. So the first one I thought we'd talk about is ideas on naming a company. That's something kind of interesting to talk about. And then from a business and accounting structure point of view, how do you structure and grow your business? LLCs, self-employed, partnerships, C Corps. People throw around a lot of names. Sometimes they don't even know what they mean, but let's dig a little bit deeper into that maybe today as we have this conversation. Also want to talk about people are contemplating writing a book to grow and springboard into a career. That's a really interesting topic. I'm excited to talk about that. And the importance, again, back to storytelling and what makes a good story. What is it that's important in the business world and how it can help benefit you and your customers? And then what's the latest trends in your business? Will AI replace me? That's the big, scary topic everybody talks about. Am I going to become a replacement and an AI bot will be in my seat? And maybe on the other end, we want to talk about how to best utilize AI to better your business. So let's start off today about ideas on naming a company. Everybody just thinks, okay, just go on a website in Florida. We have one called Sunbiz and see if the name's available. What's your ideas about naming a business?
So before we dive into that, the real question here is this real, what you're hearing right now and potentially seeing, or am I an AI construct?
Oh, no, we're getting deep with AI. Are we what's it called? Simulation.
Simulation. Today on existential concerns. So naming a company. I can tell you that one of the most enjoyable things you can do as a founder is your opportunity to name your company. However, don't do what I did. Be wise. So I came out of pharmaceutical industry where everybody's talking about accelerating this and accelerating that, accelerate research, accelerate clinical trials. And so I thought, tongue in cheek, I would very cleverly name my company the second derivative, which is, of course, acceleration, as we all know. You remember this, right? So the first derivative of motion, let's talk about Isaac Newton. The first derivative of motion is velocity. The second is acceleration. The third, you know what the third is?
Let me think. Well, didn't the apple fall on his head if we're talking about Isaac Newton, or are we talking about a different? That's acceleration, isn't it? Then.
Well, now we're working through slightly higher orders. Well, I'll just tell you, the third derivative of motion is jerk, which kind of makes sense. But the fun one, this is where mathematicians have all the fun. Fourth, fifth, and sixth derivatives of motion are, yes, you guessed it, snap, crackle, and pop.
No, it's not. Is it really?
Yes, it is. Go look it up. Like I said, like you said, I love to learn, read and learn. So naming the company, I named the company The Second Derivative, which has two major errors. Three major quirks. Number one, starting a company with the word the or the, it makes it ambiguous immediately as to whether or not how your prospects, customers, etc. are going to follow you. Is it second derivative, comma the, for example. The second issue is that I cannot tell you how many times I've had to spell out derivative for people. So my old email was pcohan@secondderivative.com, and I'd be holding my business card in front of me so that I didn't miss any letters. And then the third issue, of course, is people that are in like your industry. They say, oh, derivatives, the second derivative. Oh, you must be all about banking and hedge funds and so forth. And no, I'm clueless about that. So anyway, so moral, choose a company name that is easy to remember and easy to communicate, particularly with respect to email syntax.
That is interesting. It's funny. This is kind of related, but not really, but I was going to get a personalized license plate. I live in Florida, and the license plate was going to say ADDIN. And I'm thinking, okay, because of mathematics, add in, right? You're adding numbers. I played tennis, so that's add in, add out. And I also happen to have ADD, so I'm thinking, oh, it's ADD in, and adding like math. I'm like, that's a clever idea. But when it comes to naming, when you're naming a company, though, I guess you could have dual meanings to one name where it means something to you and it means something to the customer. But like you said, with derivatives, that might mean one thing to somebody else and something totally different to another person.
Yes, and I learned that the hard way. I like what you've chosen to name your organization. I mean, Crestville County. That's it. We know what you are. We know what you do.
And it's interesting you say that because there's actually a secondary story on that. My father-in-law started a company here in the UK, and they based it on a road that they lived on in this little town called Tenby, Wales, and the neighborhood is called Crestville. Like I spelled it, Crestiville. But for whatever reason, he named his company Crestville with no E. I'm like, well, I got to correct that problem. That's a problem we got to fix. So I'm like, we're going with Crestville Accounting. And that's how I named my company, was based off the road my father-in-law used to live on in this little town called Tenby.
Got it. Interesting.
It means something to me, but Crestville Accounting is simple. But the funny part is I made my email address all of Crestville Accounting. So your fingers get tired after you're done typing my email address. It's too many letters.
See, there you go. Same issue. Yeah. So I reverted when we actually changed the website over from secondderivative.com to greatdemo.com, and then a line like associated emails. So we actually solved the problem, although I have both emails active. But yeah, it's a small but actually slightly important lesson to learn.
It's important because you want to convey something from the name of your company. Let's say my company name was, Sheets and Company or Sheets and Partners. People would infer from that there's multiple partners within one company. You don't want to give the wrong inference based on a name of a company either, and do the opposite and confuse people, saying, well, there's no partners there. He's got a big firm, but he's the owner. So you got to be careful. You got to represent what you want the company to be. That's a good point. That's a really good point. And then do you suggest for maybe writing down different names and different ideas on paper, kind of pros and cons, like the old Cornell method, pros on one side, cons on the other, maybe?
So I actually did that. I actually did that. I had I had a number of options that I had ideated. One of which so when I was drafting the first book, um, I wanted to call it How to Give Good Demo, because that's actually a chapter name out of uh, shoot, what's his name? Oh well, the Macintosh Way. The Macintosh Way. Guy Kawasaki. That's a chapter out of Guy Kawasaki's The Macintosh Way. And I thought, ooh, that's a great title for a book until I reviewed it with my wife, and she says, no, no. How to get good demo? No. That is just no. So yeah, you do want to generate a list. Actually, that second thing, running the name by some other people, even if you're a sole founder or an individual, is another highly recommended suggestion, because you will see things with one set of lights and other people will see things differently.
I remember when I named my kids, because I have an unusual last name, with Sheets. I'm like, I'm gonna write down the names I like, and I'm gonna present it to my friends and family to see if it sounds unusual to them, because you want to make sure it flows well and the name sounds good, not gonna be picked on in the middle school playground kind of thing, and bless them with a good name, not a curse.
Yeah, they're going to go through enough dysfunctional emotionalism in middle school, so don't burden them with more.
Yeah, I don't want to name somebody first name Paper. It wouldn't be a good thing for their childhood experience. Paper Sheets or something like that.
Paper sheets, that's right. Now I'm intrigued. I have you ever, and we're going sideways here, but have you ever looked at the etymology of your last name of Sheets? Where does that come from?
Everything comes from Germanic with a Z, and the only interpretation I can have is either it was anglicized over in England, because that's where my family came from, and they changed the Z to an S and then came over to America, or it maybe didn't go back as far as Germanic as I thought, and really originated from the Anglicide from England and the UK, which I don't know, maybe they made paper or something. I'm not sure why they got that name. It used to be bestowed upon what you did for a career sometimes with last names too.
It's interesting. I wonder if you have any relation to the famous TV program Schitt's Creek.
Yes, I know. That's whenever I spell my name, I'm like, I got to spell this out right, because I don't want people misconstruing exactly that, like a Schitt's Creek. I'm like Sheets, just like papers, and they're like, oh yeah, okay, I got it now. It's so easy, it's hard.
So yeah, so naming a company has long lasting impacts. So choose wisely.
Yeah, and you're branding things off of that. Then you're going to have your logo branded off that. You're going to have people remember you, your email address. Once you go down the road of naming a company, it's pretty slippery slope. You'll get emails, you get branding, you'll get marketing materials, websites. You can't dial it back once you start, or it's very hard to dial it back once you start it. And you don't want to unwind that. Did you now utilize the name of the company? Now we're talking about writing the book. When you wrote the book, did you use any of the lessons you learned from naming the company? What happened first, the naming of the company or the book writing?
So strange enough, the book writing started first. I actually started writing the book a good 6 months before. This is a great segue into the next topic. Um, a good 6 months, maybe even a little bit more, before I hung out my own shingle, left my gainful employment, and hung out my own shingles, my own organization. Um, and I did it in a way that was kind of unanticipated. It was sort of fun. Um, a gentleman that I'd known for a number of years, who was running another company. He's actually the CEO of the company I'm on the board of now. He reached out to me and said, "Hey, Cohan, we finally got an opportunity to do a demo for Merck." And he said, "Would you take a look at what we're playing at show and give us some feedback?" Because I had been developing the methodology at that point for actually the past couple of years, and had gotten it fairly well production hardened. And so I said, "Sure." And so he shows me it, and I wrote up some ideas just to sort of watch for as he was showing me his demo. I drove over to this place, and And he shows me his demo, and I give him some feedback and quite a bit of feedback. And then as I got back home, I said, I got to write up my notes on this because I have all kinds of ideas. And I started writing, and I suddenly realized I'm writing the book. And I did. I wrote the first edition of the book in about a month. It just sort of it was all there. It just came out. That was not to say that that was the best version of the book because it's now in the third edition, but all the key ideas, all the basic concepts were articulated in that first version of the book. Um, a sub story. I learned all about print on demand. Do you know the term print on demand?
No, I've heard about publishers, but I've never heard of print on demand.
So almost everything you get now from Amazon, if you order a physical copy of a book, is known as print on demand, which literally means that it means that the moment you click purchase that book on Amazon, uh, a message is sent to physically have that book printed, and covers applied and the whole bit. So it's a just in time
I
type of a
just
thing.
gonna reference JIT, just in time shipping. I was in Belfast and I did a tour of the Bushmills whiskey tour. I know I'm off topic, but they said, "Oh, we've implemented just in time." And my wife looked at me and it's like, "What's that?" I'm like, "Just in time. You don't know what that is?" I'm like, all nerd now. I'm like, "Just in time shipping." I still 5-minute explanation. She's like, "I just wanted a basic explanation." I went into like the history of it. I'm like, I learned about it in college, and just in time shipping saves money. She's like, "Okay, I got it. I just wanted a really basic explanation of it."
So by the way, doing what you just described is partly how great demo methodology was founded. So as opposed to teaching somebody all about how something works, and by the way, I'm sure you segued into Kanban and stuff like that a while ago, Rich. No, the whole idea behind Great Demo was lead with the end. It's the Stephen Covey concept of start with the end in mind. The phrase I use is in the demo world is you do the last thing first. So instead of building a long sequence to show the big end result, I teach people to start with that because that's what people really want is the end deliverable, the outcome.
And that's exactly what she wanted. She wanted the end. How did you say it? She wanted the end first?
Tell me what good thing this is going to do for me before you waste both of our lives in teaching us all the details of how it works. Because I don't care, and B, I don't care. This I just did a discussion with somebody where I asked rhetorically. I said I believe you correct me if I'm wrong. I believe there's not a single person on earth when they were talking with a salesperson at a car dealership about buying a hybrid car that ever said, "Tell me, please, how does the car know when to switch from battery to engine and from engine back to battery?" No, right? They don't care about that. I also don't believe there's a single person who's bought an EV who said, "Teach me about the battery technology in this car." No, what they want, how far can I drive?
That's just 'cause I have two friends. One has an electric vehicle and one has a hybrid. I'm like, hey, does this switch at a certain mile per hour or is it all the way through to the end? Like, I don't know. And the other friend of mine has the battery one. I'm like, how do they recycle the batteries? Like, I don't know. When it dies, I get a new one. I'm like, yeah, that's all exactly like you said. They don't get into the details at all. They don't.
That's right. So that was exactly what happened. And so I got back from my colleague's house after seeing his demo, and I started drafting the notes. And as I said, I just kept writing them up, and I suddenly realized I had the book, and I finished it up about 5 months or so before I had formally launched the business. And what I did originally for those people who are contemplating a book route, originally I looked at traditional publishers. Now, traditional publishers is a little bit of a catch-22, which is a great book. And that is, if you're not a successful author, previously published, they don't want you.
Oh, right. They want a mass amount of publishing. They want a lot of books. And you're saying they don't want to.
They don't want to bankroll some. They don't want to take a chance. So they want somebody that's already proven to be successful. So I reached out to I still have a filing cabinet over here with the rejection letters of something like 25 or 30 different publishers. And then I was in a real life bricks and mortar bookstore. And what I had been doing is pulling books off the shelves in the business area and looking at the writing down the publisher's name. This one was one I'd never come across. And as I started to read about it and did some research on the web, they described themselves as one of the first print on demand publishing houses, which is exactly that. They would basically help you through the process of taking your manuscript in Word or Google Docs or whatsoever and getting it converted into the media that could be then used to produce a paperback book or in modern times Kindle or whatsoever. Now it's all done. It's all ridiculously easy on Amazon and other platforms. That was a huge shift. And the big difference, and something that people should be aware of, the big difference is in the world of traditional publishers, they may make you pay to actually publish the book. Current prices, if you want to work with a publisher today who will get your book placed on Amazon and its derivatives and so forth, and to do some small amount of marketing, is around $10,000. That's what that's what vendors are charging, and people buy it all the time. They'll help you, they're offering good services. They'll help you with the editing to a certain thing. They may even have a copy editor as opposed to a straight editor. They're different. And they will go through the machinations of getting your book, you know, formatted properly for printing through Amazon and Kindle and so forth. It'll cost you $10,000 plus or minus, and it will take you probably a lot longer than if you did it yourself. But the bonuses are that if you don't want to worry about the processes and if you don't have editing capabilities and so forth, then you've got the help. So,
Oh my gosh. It's good. You have a proven track record with people, but that's a lot of money where you can do it other ways now that are more efficient, or digitize it on not Spotify. It wouldn't be Spotify. It'd be, well, Amazon, obviously, one way.
Kindle, yeah, Barnes and Noble's platforms and so forth. Yeah, so and they traditionally you would end up if you worked with what was known as a vanity publisher, you paid them $5,000 or $10,000. They would ship you 500 copies of your book in boxes, which you then stored in your garage as you tried to move copies of them through whatever vehicles and means that you possibly could.
Well, yeah, one of my first clients was John C. Wiley. The book publishing companies are one of the bigger, well, older ones and biggest, but Wiley was a very big publishing company. But I feel like in the days have gone by, they were kind of losing favor now because people aren't doing books that way. Like you said, they're doing it through Amazon or other methodologies. It's not the same, book binding like they used to do back in the day. It's changed quite a bit.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's a good analogy is digital photography versus film photography. You are certainly old enough to remember thinking carefully. Do I want to expend a picture on this particular image that I'm looking at now? I've only got 36 slides on this roll of film. I have to think carefully about it. Today, electrons are cheap. You just go click, 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 click. Sometimes the camera does it for you on your phone. You don't even know your active mode is coming from a boot or you're recording videos. We don't even think about it in terms of a limited resource today. The same is frankly true of writing books. Anybody can write a book and get it published because they can just go on Amazon and say, I'm publishing my book. Now, cautionary statement though is, will anybody buy it?
Unless you just use it as a marketing piece to say, I've written a book, but no one's read it. That's different than actually having a published book with many readers. There's a big difference.
Now, and this is a fun segue as well. In the world of business, when you publish a book about a particular business topic, you are prepared to be perceived as an expert. Whether or not you are one is immaterial. But because you published a book, you're perceived as an expert, and that becomes an incredible marketing tool. That is an incredible marketing.
I've seen people do that as seen on New York Times or in New York Times, as seen on CNN, or as seen written or as per written a book, whatever it is. And they use that as a marketing piece rather than a person who's actually published, like a scientist or a doctor would say they're published. It's a different wording.
It's a different. So I'll give you an example. So early on, when I was trying to establish the business, I had left an organization where I was the president of the business unit with about 120 reports, and boy, was I tired of whining, and that was just me. And spending far too much time with human resources and dealing with politics, blah blah. I'm done. Forget it. I launched the business, and I needed to get traction. I had some initial customers who had been originally some of my competition, who were eager to learn how to beat them with demos, and they were actually hungry to learn. So that was a fast way to get bootstrapped and get some references, and reference customers, and happy users, and so forth. But for people that did not know me, when I reached out to them, I would often say something like, "Hey, if you're sufficiently interested in exploring this, I'm going to send you a copy of my book, and I want to ask you to just start reading it." And I used the following phrase. I said, "If you hate it, then we can stop right there. On the other hand, if the ideas resonate, then let's come back together and start talking about how this might apply for your organization."
Oh my God, that's great. So, would you recommend if somebody was to write a book or want to start a company, would you suggest a certain order in which they do it in? Maybe start the company first, even though that's not the way you did it, or write the book first?
I think I would write the book first, for a range of reasons. Maybe one of the most important ones is if you are not getting external funding for your business, and I did not. Actually, this is a fun story. We should come back to this, but I did not. I needed to have materials ready to go, basically on day one. So I needed to have the book done, and in my case, I was teaching workshops, so training people face to face, or then more recently over the web, groups of 10, 12, 15 people, day and a half type of a session. I needed to have my credentials, which was the book, and I needed to have the training materials as well, which I pulled out of the book, or used the book as basically the framework for the training materials. So the book, for example, started with, here's the core methodology, and then the the second portion of the chapters were, here's how to deal with this kind of situation, this kind of situation. There's a different set of topics. So topics like, managing questions, or storytelling, or operating over the web. Those were I call them elective topics for the workshops. They were the subsequent chapters in the book, if you will. So I needed to have all that ready.
That's really clever. So you utilize the meat and potatoes, so to say, from the book to help bring that into the springboard into the business, and for writing up not policies and procedures, but writing up different aspects to help teach other people how to do what you're doing. Okay. And then I was just thinking back, and I always, I sometimes I dumbify topics.
Well, here's a good story. How many times do you encounter people that are contemplating founding but can't quite pull the trigger?
You mean starting up a business? You mean, or just
Yeah. Yeah, starting up a business, leaving what they're doing now, and just they can't pull the trigger, even though they really, really want to.
they're terrified. Well, I'll answer that in reverse, saying what they feel like, and they're terrified. They think that the cliff is an abyss and not a mountain to climb up to go higher, and they fear everything that could go wrong, and they tend to focus on the negatives as opposed to the positives. But I deal with it all the time in business. People trying to make that leap from employed to self-employed, or working for somebody else to owning their own business. It happens a lot, and people get afraid of them.
We are victims of momentum. We are victims of momentum. We will follow the same pathway, even if we hate it, unless we're given a shove in a new direction. So that's where I was when I was getting ready to found this business. I written a book. I was getting the book published and out there, but I was still driving in an hour commute on the way in the morning, and an hour and a quarter in the evening. um, Frustrated, angry. Every evening I would come home, my wife would say, "How are you?" "I'm And so one evening she's the world's greatest salesperson, although she would never say that. She would never even internalize that. But she said, "So, when are you gonna start your new business? When are you gonna start the second room?" We talked about the names of it, and I said, real soon." And she says, "Okay, let's say you start the business, you resign tomorrow, you start the second room tomorrow, after it. She's the beautiful question. She said, what's the worst thing that could happen?" And I said, "Well, and by the way, we'd gone through a slightly different discussion just immediately prior to that, which was me asking, well, how much runway do we have? If I don't make a single sale, how much runway do we have you know, before we're out of business?" And she said about 9 months to a year. Now, great. What you and I had spoken earlier, one of the funny things you asked me was, well, how do you manage your money? And I said, I don't. My job has always been to bring in the revenues, pass it to my wife, who then hides it from me. 'Cause I will make yeah, I will make bad investment decisions, a little bit like Mark Twain and his typesetting machine. Um, and yeah, I'll make bad decisions. So that's been our relationship since we had children. As you know, I became the primary revenue new revenues generator and passive over to her. Anyway, so she knew how much money we had, and I said, "Hey, what's our runway?" She said, "9 months to the year." And then she says, "What's the worst thing that could happen?" And I said, "Well, we don't get any traction, and I have to go back and get a real job." And she said, "Would it be a challenge to do that?" I said, "No, I know there's several companies that would be delighted to have me." She said, "Then is there any reason why you shouldn't get started right away?" And I went, "I guess not." But yeah, that was important. Working me over the edge of the cliff. That was really what.
It brings up an interesting point because if you take that to the next level, and then by the time somebody calls me, they're either in the middle of that discussion that you're talking to your wife about, or they've made the decision and then they say, "Great, I feel like I'm in the abyss. What do I do to structure that company so it grows the right way from a tax perspective?" And I'm going to jump in real quick. I know it's kind of the tax talk, but I thought I'd kind of maybe sprinkle a little bit of accounting talk here, to kind of explain that I'm now getting the conversation just after or as you and your wife are talking. I'd be the person that would come in to say, "Okay, that's great. You've talked about starting a company. You know what kind of nest egg you have in support of your financials to keep you going for a certain period of time, in your case, 9 months. Now, how do you want to structure that company?" And then they look at me with a deer in headlights saying, "Well, I just thought I was a business owner. You mentioned Schitt's Creek earlier. And I remember there's one conversation about, oh, it's a deduction." And he's like, "Well, what is a deduction?" He's like, "It's a deduction." He couldn't explain what a deduction was, but he used it as if he knew what a deduction was. And a lot of times clients come to me going, "What do you mean? I just want to start a business." I'm like, "Well, yeah, well, what type of business do you want to start? As far as a structure within the IRS, what kind of bank accounts you're going to have." So I walk them through to talk about the benefits of being self-employed, which is where you have no company behind you whatsoever, but you're paying, unfortunately, an additional 13.5% to the government on what is referred to as self-employment tax. It's no more than you or I when we get a wage, or when you got a wage. It's the Social Security and Medicare portion you pay to the government. If you add it all up together, it's 13.5%. But they refer to it as self-employment tax, but it's no different than getting a wage and taking 13.5% and giving it to Social Security and Medicare. So that goes in addition to your regular income tax. So I'm thinking, well, if you can avoid being self-employed, maybe structuring your company as a business. And they say, "Okay, great, I want to be an LLC." And again, same conversation back to Schitt's Creek. It's a deduction. Well, an LLC is a state moniker. It doesn't have anything to do with the federal government per se, in the sense of how it's taxed, right? So an LLC is just, you could be a self-employed LLC, still paying self-employment tax. And I'm going through this for a minute. Sorry, I know we're segueing off your topic, and I just wanted to take a minute, if you don't mind, just to kind of go through this big circle here. I apologize, but I thought it'd be good to kind of go through this little circle in a sense that people need to understand the difference between self-employed and corporation. And an LLC doesn't mean that you're in actually a business. It means a state level. At the state level, you're protecting your assets. But at the federal level, you have to choose how you want to be structured, right? So the first one is self-employed. You just file on your personal return, you pay the 13.5% self-employment tax. If you decide to go LLC or Inc., that's another avenue. The LLC, again, just means you have a liability protection for the business in case something happens. You're putting a box around your business at that point. So if you get sued, hopefully it's harder for people to punch through that box to get to your personal assets, and they're only going to, basically sue your business assets, whatever is your bank account or future earnings, things of that nature, but not you personally, not your house, your car, things like that. That put a box over the business. At the federal level, though, there's a lot of different ones, but I'll just say there's three main ones, right? So there's three main entity types. I'm getting over a cold from the holidays, sorry, but the first one goes hand in glove with an LLC called an S corporation. And the S corporation basically takes the income from the business, it takes the deductions from the business, and whatever is left, strangely enough, doesn't get taxed at the corporate level. It passes through and sits on your personal return, with the difference between self-employed and you're not taxed on the additional 13.5% you would be as self-employed. With an S corp, you're just taxed as regular. Well, it's actually active income. So it's taxed at a different criteria, but it's still taxed as your regular income. So that's an S corporation. Partnership, very similar, but you got to have two people now. So if you had your own business with just you could never be a partnership. You have to have two or more people. And again, taxed with the income from the business minus deductions. And then whatever is left, the net income passes through. That's what they call them, pass-through entities, S corps and partnerships, taxed on your personal return. And again, you avoid the self-employment tax. The difference between S corps and partnerships, S corps have to pay themselves some kind of wage equal to whatever they would earn in the marketplace for a position of their job. So if someone's going to replace you, right, Peter, whatever you were doing, they'd say, okay, you should be earning $150,000 a year. You need to pay that much. And until you reach that, you got to pay like a 60-40 split in wages. Partnerships, though, strangely have no wages. You can't even have wages. It's considered partners distributions, and it's taxed almost like self-employed again. So it's not really a big benefit. And then C Corp is a box in itself, and everything's taxed within the C corporation. So when people think corporations, you think, oh, it's a corporation. That's the traditional corporation. The income stays in there. The earnings stay in there. The tax is taxed in there. It's a lower tax rate. But to get money out, you're double taxed. Did you run into the term double taxation much when you were trying to set up your business? Did anybody mention double taxation at all to you?
So two things. First, you're reminding me very, very much of Rick Moranis's character, the accountant in Ghostbusters. That was what you just said was such a thing of beauty. It was like, this is a topic near to your heart. So anyway, so that's one thing. The second thing is, I really wish I had had guidance from somebody like you 25 years ago, because I should have gone the S corp or the LLC route as opposed to sole proprietorship, which is what I didn't know any better, and my wife was not thinking or worrying about this part of things. And so we didn't. We've never made the change, and I probably have thrown far too much money to the government as a result of that. So this is a important lesson learned. We've done fine financially. I'm really happy where we've ended up, but we could have done a little bit better, probably to the degree of 13.5% every year.
And it's interesting because people come to me saying, oh, exactly like you and your wife's conversation. They say, okay, great, I want to set the business up. And I'm like, well, if you don't have this conversation, it could happen just like you, where you end up not getting good advice, and then you go down a rabbit hole. And again, once you go down that rabbit hole, it's pretty much you're going down it for a long time. So C corp, partnership, S corp, self-employed, and sometimes self-employed makes sense, but that's usually if you're kind of under 100,000 or less. Typically, there might be reasons otherwise, and I don't want to state generics here, but for the most part, under 100,000 of gross income might make sense. But after that, you leave that train, you got to kind of make a choice on a business. So I I hijacked the conversation here for a bit, but I was kind of just talking through this, speaking to the audience and to you about the benefits of different types of business structure.
All good, all good.
But with your situation, I guess what I wanted to go through is you mentioned about writing the book. You're thinking writing the book can be a good segue into starting a business. You mentioned the importance of naming the business. But as far as what you did, you worked on a process where you put the end first and you put storytelling as a primary function of that. But storytelling and end first, maybe explain more what it. We understand what you do it to a higher level. Maybe give a little more detail about that importance of storytelling and how your business kind of succeeded through that, or how other businesses can succeed through that, I should say.
Yeah. So let me say this in well, let's do this storytelling. Slow and steady.
Yeah, wins the race. Wins the race.
Slow and steady. Okay, slow and steady wins the race. That is a what's the name of that story?
Well, you want to go slow, methodical, and do it the right way, and not rush to the ends and cut corners. You want to do it thoroughly and to the nth degree.
Okay, perfect. And what's the do you remember the name of that story?
Was it the tortoise and the hare?
It's the tortoise and the hare, exactly. And now here's something amusing. Who first collected that and where?
I mean, what? Where did you first kind of make that publicized in a book or something?
Yeah.
Was it Disney with Bugs Bunny, or am I going childish now? Maybe.
You're thinking Warner Brothers, but yeah. You're thinking Warner Brothers.
Sorry, I went the wrong way with that one.
No, you went exactly where I was hoping you'd go. That is the tortoise and the hare is one of Aesop's fables. Aesop lived, yeah, and Aesop lived
Missed that by a couple hundred years.
couple thousand years. Aesop lived 2,600 years ago. It was a sunny day in ancient Greece. And he didn't even create that story, he just collected it. The fables are a collection of stories that are in use, as ways of communicating key ideas or information, storytelling. Um, Now, there's a fascinating thing about the tortoise and the hare. It's a story that has been around. Everybody knows it. Every culture has it. The animals change depending in some cases on the culture, but the key elements are retained completely. 2,600 years. Now, if you look at the message in that story, if you just work hard, but you have kids, right?
I do too. Yep.
Two how old?
My son's 22 and my daughter's 19.
Okay, perfect. If you your son might respond a little bit more, but your daughter probably not. If you say because still a teenager, if you say to either of them, if you just work hard and persevere, you will do well in life. What would be their typical response?
I mean, yeah, I'll try to and do my best, but I got to do more than that.
And what they're thinking is whatever.
Yeah, they blow me off with a blow off answer. Yes.
Exactly. So if you just try to teach that idea, that meme of work hard and you do well, it doesn't have legs. It doesn't resonate. It won't be remembered. It falls flat. But if you embed that meme, that idea in a story with certain key storytelling elements, well, that concept can live for, in this case, 2,600 years. So you think about yeah. So um, storytelling, there's a great book by Chip and Dan Heath. You probably saw it at airport bookstores like 15 years ago or something like that, called Made to Stick. It was kind of a reddish book with what appeared to be a slash of duct tape across the cover. Made to Stick. And in that book, Chip and Dan Heath talk about, well, what makes something sticky, and they basically define what are the elements of a good story. And there are things like it's got to be relatable, it's got to be perceived as a real experience, it's got to have an emotional hook of some time, it's got to have an element of surprise. And so when you think about the Warner Brothers version of the Tortoise and the Hare, um it's comedy, but we all would expect that the hare, that Bugs, would win the race because he's all right. He does, of course, because he goes off and fools around, takes a nap, and so forth. But there's some other little twists One of the big twists is he takes a nap and he loses. There's another little twist, which is it's fun. If you look at the still from um, the start of the race, the tortoise is cheating. He's over, he's already over this. The moral of this exercise is you really want somebody to be able to both remember something and here's a kicker, retell it with high fidelity, high accuracy, wrap your communication in the form of a story, in the form of a story. So I'll give you so here's a story as an example. So this is from my latest book, Suspending Disbelief, which is a collection of short business stories. I urge everybody to get, read, and laugh at. Um, the story is entitled "My First Business Purchase Ended as a Failure." For software, just ended as a failure. Yeah, which is, by the way, which is a book in its own right, right? It's like, well, why? What happened? So, so I was a product manager back, and we were getting to the point. This is before Jira, but we were getting to the point where we really needed some way to track enhancement requests and bug tracking and all the other related and changes and so forth. We needed something to track others across a series of products, and I found a tool that looked good. I don't remember how much it was at the time. It was during the era of perpetual license software, so it was, the initial cost was fairly heavy. It was like 25 or 35,000 or so. This is back before the century. And and I thought I had built up what I needed in terms of here's why we need it. And I went to the CFO and said, John, because that was his name, John, I need $30,000 to buy this product management tool. And he looked at me and he said, and I quote, no. And I said, why not?
He just said no to you.
He said, no. He said, no. I said, and it was we'll give you the second half of the story. He said, no. And I said, why not? He said, because you didn't present a business case. He said, you've asked me for $30,000. If I put $30,000 in T-bill at 4% interest, I know what my yield is going to be. I know what my return on investment is going to be. You haven't be anything. All you've taught a bunch of complaints. Your team can't track this. It takes too long. You're making mistakes, etc. You need to come back to me with a business case, and I'll be happy to grant you that. We do have it. Now, the upside of the story is he was my mentor at that time, and he was fabulous to have someone who was the CFO as your mentor. We had we had a wonderful relationship where I taught him what we did as a business. We were providing tools for pharmaceutical scientists to advance discovery, and he had no clue what went in the lab. Small molecule chemistry and all that. He was like, "I come in. I have no idea what you guys do in the lab. Tell me what is this?" Well, so aspirin, I would tell him. And then in return, he taught me about things like how do you build a business case, um, the value of money over time, and on and on. So I went back. He said, "Here's how to build a business case. You said there's a lot of manual times, a lot of errors. Calculate the time, the errors, the impact of that, and translate that then to dollars, and let's see if the equation works." And I said, "Oh," and I went back to my desk, and about a day later, I had a solid business case, and he said, "Yes." So that's an interesting more.
So you framed it in a way that not only made sense, but you did the research on it, but you also had to put the value add inside of the request that you made as well. So it's the end user in mind, not just what you want. But like you said, if you're talking to your children and you say something like, do this, they're like, yeah, right, whatever. But if you can put a story behind it or the end in the beginning, it resonates with them more and makes more sense. That's really, I never really thought of it that way actually at all. That's a really interesting way to think of it.
Well, that's and what I just did was I taught, if you will, the idea of you got to have a business case in a form of a story.
I never ever thought of it like that. It is totally foreign in a way to most people think.
If you literally go back, 3,000 years or more before there was a lot of writing of that. If you go back 300 years or more before there was writing that was commonly done and consumed by humans, storytelling was the primary vehicle for communicating important information.
That makes sense. Yeah, you tell a story that goes on down the line from next generation to the next, and you use it as not parables, it wouldn't be parables, it'd be storytelling, maybe in the form of a parable.
So here's a way of looking at it. There are easily, let's say, there are 5 ways to communicate a meme, an idea. Um, you could say something like, uh, so in the world of software, our biframulator, I'm making up a term, our biframulator capability will save you enormous amounts of time. What is that? That's a feature statement. That doesn't do anything. That's a feature statement. It's the weakest of all possible. The next level is called an advantage statement, and it endeavors to suppositionally connect with what your prospect might also want. So, our our biframulator capability enables companies like you to save enormous amounts of time finding the data and the information you're looking for. Okay, that's a little bit better.
A little better. There's some benefits in there, right?
The next level is called a benefit statement, where you've actually quantified or you understand how much, and or whether or not the prospect has confirmed that they have this problem. So your benefit statement is more like our bifranulator capability will help you save on the order of 2 days per week for your team of 10 people, based on the numbers that we discussed earlier today. So that's a benefit statement. You're now connecting the end result to a quantified and confirmed need on the part of the prospect. Okay. So that's a pretty powerful statement, and that actually helps you with the building a real life business case. The fourth level is to use an analogy or a metaphor. So our biframulator capability is exactly like the ability to find the proverbial needle in a haystack. In your case, the haystack isn't hay; it's the text and data that you've got sitting in all these various repositories. Our tool will help you find exactly what you need in moments, just like that needle in the haystack story. Now, what you're doing with that is you are anchoring a new concept on something that your prospect or the person you're talking to already knows and understands. So, we talk about what's another good so needle in a haystack. A fabulously powerful search term, a searching capability enables you to act like a needle in a haystack. People use the term anchor, right? That's another good one. Oh, this is anchoring you to the bottom, like it's the 50-pound anchor and you can't move. It's an analogy, it's a metaphor. The fifth level then is to actually wrap that capability in a form of a story. And you could do it like this. You could say, for example, so you know what? You just reminded me of another customer who's in a very, very similar situation, and they were trying to put together and complete a project, but they're really, really struggling, and they were not getting finding data, the text they needed. They were going way over budget and way over time. They ended up bumping into us at a trade show. We ended up showing them this biframulator capability. They went, "Holy cow!" They smacked their foreheads. They purchased our tool, and what we heard is in a week's time, they had completed the projects on time, on spec, and ahead of schedule.
Wow. And now it means something to them. It's a story that they can relate to because it has people involved, and they get the benefit out of it by hearing what happened to the other person.
Exactly. And although I probably could have generated a slightly better one, that story becomes sticky. It's much stickier than our biframulator capability will save you time and money. That is sticky. That is what everybody would be saying. So now they've got a story they can remember and they can retell. They could actually go to their CFO and say, "Hey, I heard about another company who was able to use this capability. They were able to meet their project deadline. In fact, they said they recovered 3 full-time equivalents as a result, and we're able to redeploy them to other more valuable tasks as a result of using this technology." Boom. By the way, you'll notice never talked about how that technology worked. Never talked how that search algorithm works or how the searching is hashed. What we were talking about is in terms of outcomes and desired end state.
And you're relating it to a more human level story so they can listen and collect what they need to out of it based on a human level story, remember it, and not have to get into the weeds of technology and how things work. Like you said, the electric car and how the battery works. It's more high level. What benefits me? Interesting story. I'll remember that now.
Yeah. By the way, I gotta go sideways a bit. I have a colleague who founded a battery technology company. So he actually is deeply interested in how batteries work, but he's the only one.
I imagine he does. My God, I can't believe how the time is flying here. We're going through this really quick. I'm thinking maybe now we can segue into maybe just a minute or two about AI, and then talk a little bit about you personally, and then kind of promote more about what it is if you want to promote anything. But do you want to add anything on this on AI and people's fears are all over the place? So maybe about a couple minutes or two about AI and betterment of business, possibly.
So sure, I would say first of all, anybody that has a credit card is using AI, whether or not they know it or not, because sure, every time they execute a transaction in this process using some financial AI tools to ask the musical question, does this transaction look like a transaction that would come from that person?
Right. So I'll buy something. I'm in the UK because I travel to the UK often, and I'll go to swipe my card, and it'll say transaction denied. I'm thinking, well, I better go to my bank account, make sure there's money in there. The money's in there, and then sure enough, 30 seconds later, fraud alert. Was this you? You say yes or no. You have to retry the transaction again because it's not something within my algorithm, as you just said, of transactional purchases.
So that's a tangible example of AI that's been in place for quite a while. Because think back, when was the first time? Yeah, it is AI. And here's another example. In the world of medicine, um, and reading X-rays, radiography, pattern finding or image analysis has been one of the highly fruitful examples of using AI. AI is very good at being trained to find, for example, cancerous objects in X-rays, and computers don't get tired.
No, they don't. You can just feed it to them all day long. They don't need the breaks or take.
And it's well documented that they will find things that humans will miss. And the opposite is in this particular case not true. Humans typically do not find things that AI misses. So there's a lot of good AI applications out there. And one side of thinking is embrace these because they are truly helping us. Do you ever do a search in Google now?
Yeah, searching in Google.
And what do you get? You get a summary.
Yeah, you do now. You do.
That's an AI. That's a plus. It's an AI tool. It used to be we get a list of websites, right?
Right.
And you scan through the top 3 or 4 or 5 and go, oh no, I guess I just have to start clicking on these. Now, no, you get a summary of what you asked, particularly if you're asking in the form of a question as opposed to just typing in a website, of course. Um, that's AI in practice. So uh,
It does better your life in the sense that it gives you protection for, like you said, through fraud. It gives you ability to read data easier. Chat GPT helps you take the opposite and takes data and summarizes it into information that can be used for professional reasons, professional purposes. Like people, the thing that people, from my perspective, people saying to me is, well, you can just do tax research through Chat GPT, but I use that as a first layer resource to say, okay, I'm going to summarize the importance of the topic, but then I'm going to take and drill down into more the code sections and the IRS regulations and the details. I don't just take it at face value. That to me is a bouncing off point to get to a deeper level, but it helps me kind of framework the topics at the higher level.
yeah, so what AI is typically good at is finding the mediums, finding the comfortable mediums. What AI is not necessarily good at is finding and exploring intriguing outliers. And that is that's one of the risks, the way that most people apply AI today. So, for example, in the world of sales, people are looking at, what are best practices, and they're trying to use AI to build models to say, okay, well, this is the typical workflow, the sales process that seems to work best. What AI does not look at are things like, how come this particular opportunity closed in 2 days, as opposed to our normal process that takes 6 to 9 to 12 months. And
I think it leaves out exactly what you were talking about earlier is the story, not the storytelling aspect of it from AI, but more the human. Is that a better way to put it? The human interaction part of AI. And that's why I don't think AI is ever going to replace everything, because there's too many human connection needs and stories that have to happen that AI, I just don't think will ever get to that point to replace humans in every single job and every single position you can think of. It just doesn't seem to be possible.
I never like to say never, but certainly for the shorter term foreseeable future, I'm sure that is true. Um, as an ex chemist, as a scientist, um, we're always looking. We have two mantras. One is, I hope I've chosen the right experiment to run, because you have a limited number of experiments you can do. And then the second half of that is, I wish I could do more experiments. I wish I could do more experiments. And the classic example is, you do an experiment. Here's like an XY plot. You do an experiment, we get a data point. Okay, what do you need to do? Well, I don't know anything because it just has a single data point. So we run a second experiment. We get a second data point up here. And what most people would say at this point is, okay, maybe there's a relationship. I could probably draw a line through those two points. But the scientist says, nah, that's too early. I need a third data point that's in between them. And if it turns out that that data point is here, oh, well, that suggests a totally different function. It's not a linear function like this, but it's a parabolic function like this. That's totally different. Yeah. And if you get another data point that's like way the heck up here on the top left of your quadrant, as a scientist, you've got two options. One is you think, well, that's a weird anomaly. That's an outlier. I will throw it out. Yeah, I will throw it out, which is what most AI tools will do. But the clever scientists will say, whoa, 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 wait a moment. Why is that happening? Because that's an interesting performance set of conditions. So, AI, one final observation. Um, a lot of people, and I'm included, confuse AI versus automation.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah. Automation, I think more like the robots on a line of a assembly line, right? Versus AI is more intelligent level.
Yeah. So actually, using the assembly line analogy, automation is building an assembly line. So doing this, each station does the same thing over and over and over. AI, I actually remember this. I'd gone and visited a I had gone to visit an organization that actually did that. They built apparatus for assembly lines, and they were showing me this really cool machine that basically had a camera, and it was just receiving a random selection of parts and components, all the different sizes, the shapes, and so forth. And what the camera and this instrument had to do was to figure out what is this thing, and then pick it up, all different shapes, and put it in the right bin for the next steps of the process. So the automation was the full line and the ability of the robot to grab things and put them in the right places. The AI was analyzing the shapes and say, okay, this is an I-beam piece that goes over here. This is a leg that goes over there.
That makes sense. One's making it just repetition, the other one's using intelligence to discern what it is versus the AI aspect. Oh, that is interesting. The AI topic scares a lot of people, and I know it's something that concerns some people in business. But I think you just got to embrace the best you can and not be afraid of it.
Do you remember when people were all concerned that computers were going to take all of our jobs?
Oh yeah, well, like you said, there you go. But it didn't. It enhances it.
And Henry Ford assembly line, same thing.
Same thing, and he maximized it. I want to go through and learn more about you, Peter, as a person, but I want to start in the end, maybe. It I want to go all the way back to kind of childhood where you grew up, but I really want to hear that story about the freeze dried beer, and then maybe go back into your childhood as well, because that topic and that story sounds really, really fun to hear about.
Freeze-dried beer. My wife and I, this is way back last century. My wife and I are backpacking in the Sierra Nevada mountains. We're at about 10,500 feet. The sun is about 12 feet away. It's hot, it's dry. We've been hiking all day, and both of us kind of look at one another and go, God, I would love a beer right now. And so but nobody in their right mind is going to carry bottles, God forbid, or cans of beer backpacking. That was highly inefficient. And anyway, and so I said, I was on the bench, so what we say on the bench. I was still working in the lab at that point, and I had under my control a 40-liter freeze dryer. It was a production size freeze dryer. Again, it's like it could freeze dry 40 liters worth of liquid at a time on multiple shelves. And I'd been just recently at that point trained in lyophilization, freeze drying. And I thought, I can do this. I could do this. And so one weekend, I yeah, one weekend I got oh, I was perfectly zoned. I went in and I chose three different beers, a pretty light one, a medium one, and a like Molson, I think, and a Heineken.
Was one of them Sierra Nevada beer? Isn't that a beer brand though? I just had to add that in.
I used Sierra Nevada Pale Ale as my thicker one. So I had four different ways, I think, of four different beers, divined a freeze drying cycle, did the whole process, and had good looking material at the end of the run. Two small problems. When you freeze dry a material like beer, it pulls off the water. But it also pulls off the alcohol and the CO2. Yeah, so I had this was beer tasting, dried beer tasting stuff, and I needed to figure out a way to return the alcohol and the CO2. Well, I'm a chemist, and I did a little bit of research, and there's a compound that when it hits water, as the CRC handbook says, dissociates rapidly and completely into molecules of CO2 in one molecule of CO2 in one molecule of alcohol. Yeah, perfect. And it's the diethyl ester of carbonic acid everywhere.
Of course, I was just thinking that was my second guess.
That was so kind of popcorn. And so it's like Sunday morning. I did the runs on Saturday in the freeze drying, and Sunday morning I'm back in my lab, the fume hood, and as I said, the COC handbook says dissociates means it reacts rapidly, completely. And in the world of chemistry, we talk about something called dropwise addition, which means go slow. Didn't go slow enough, and all of a sudden there's this foaming mass. It probably looked like a Gene Wilder or Woody Allen scene out of a movie. Foaming mass coming out of your beating it back. Yeah, I finally get it beaten back, and I cleaned up my mess, and I tuned up the reaction, and I figured out how to do it. It worked. But the punchline in this story I should have started with is when people came into work at Cal Biochem, which is where it was, San Diego, on Monday morning, they're all like, "What are you here? What the heck is?" Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, long story, it worked, and we did enjoy it a few times. But what I really had wanted to do was to turn it into business, but had a discussion with the government who basically said, well, it's alcohol, so you have to treat it that way. I said, but it's not alcohol till you have the water. Vegas agreed. And I was like 22, I think at the time, 23 maybe, something like that. I didn't know how to pursue from there, so we just enjoyed our own little private freeze dried beer and gave it up. But yeah, I am the first person that I know of in the world to successfully freeze dried beer. So there you go.
That is an amazing story. I love that. I know our listeners are going to love hearing that. That is amazing. So you started out in chemistry at a young age. Before that, where did you grow up and your family? Did you have siblings? Yeah.
I grew up in Palo Alto, California, so right across the street from Stanford. Went to Palo Alto High School, known colloquially as Pali, and yes, we looked down on the other high schools in that same city. It's actually a fairly famous high school. Joan Baez matriculated there. I think that the son of Hoover, the president, matriculated there, and several members of the Grateful Dead went through there as well.
Well, you always think of the tech capital of the country. I guess is also creativity capital as well with all those different artists.
Approximately, no, camping any further than about a half a mile from Palo Alto High School is Hewlett and Packard's garage, where Silicon Valley began. Yeah, it's only a half a mile away or so.
How far is that? I should know, but how far away is that from Cupertino? That's another big mecca, isn't it, for technology?
Yeah, it's Cupertino's where Apple is. Apple's headquarters is 15 miles, something like that.
So that mecca, obviously Silicon Valley, it doesn't just have technology. It sounds like a lot of creative people came from there. And your family, what did your parents do for a career? Were they in science as well?
My mother was a chemist, originally trained as a chemist, which is partly how I got that bug. She did frankly, one of the early women practicing on the bench. There weren't a lot in that era, that mid to late 1940s, 1950s. My father was an aerospace engineer, or more accurately, a rocket scientist.
I'm just gonna say your dad's a rocket scientist and your mom's a chemist. I think apple doesn't fall far from the tree on this one. We get to where you get all your.
He worked at Lockheed Missiles in Space, and he worked on a lot of projects that were secret. And the family joke was he would come home from work each day, and we'd say, "How was your day?" And he'd say, "I can't tell you."
Literally cannot tell you. Oh my God.
Actually, one of the projects that he worked on early on is called Corona, which you remember
Not the freeze-dried beer, though. I just wanted to make
not the freeze-dried beer. Do you remember the Cuban Missile Crisis?
Yeah, I do.
The 1960s, and there's images of a Russian ship or a Soviet ship with ICBMs and kind of like the ballistic missiles on the deck. Those pictures were taken from space by a Corona satellite, and at that time the Corona process was film, and they would take pictures from satellites in space. The satellite would drop a payload of the film. The payload would enter the atmosphere with a blade of heat shield. Parachute would open, and a C-130 Hercules aircraft flying with like scissors, if you will, not cutting scissors, but on the nose would snag this parachuting kit, and they capture it and then take it in, have the film developed. That was the peak of technology in the early 1960s.
Well, that's like instant photos nowadays would be from the camera. That was instant photos back then. I wonder if they use Kodak film, as we talked about print film earlier, or if they just use their own in-house film.
As a matter of fact, if I recall correctly, Lockheed had a special relationship with Kodak to produce incredibly high resolution films specifically for those kinds of operations. There was a lot of that went on.
There's a lot of secret things with Kodak, and then obviously Lockheed and all the technology companies. Back in the 40s through the 70s, there is all sorts of things going on with the government and secret projects and things nobody, as you know specifically, things that people just didn't know about.
Yeah. So and I'm not even sure if this is true or not, but you remember the Hubble telescope, right? It's still up there, of course. It works. And one day, I don't remember what prompted this, but my dad says, "So you're all excited about the Hubble telescope?" And I was. I've been very big into, to astronauts, and watched the landing on the moon with great excitement as a kid. And he says, "That's not the only one of those."
Oh my God. You're like, wait a minute, hang on. This is new.
Yeah, I said, "Wait, what?" He says, "Yeah." He just said, "That's it." That's all he said. Yeah.
You're like, thanks for dropping them right now. Now, what do I do with that information? I can't search it on Google back then. I just gotta accept that.
That was just it's just pointing in different directions, pointing towards Earth.
So your family had a lot of a lot of obviously chemist and technology and background. You end up going into the chemist side of things, and then for you to end up going into storytelling and book writing, it's a little bit different direction, even though you started off similar to your family. Interesting how you pivoted.
Here's that story. So I'd been in the lab for about, I don't know, 5 years or so, and I've been getting tired of that particular position. And my wife says, "Well, says you like to talk. You'd be great in marketing." And at first I was offended because my sense was that, oh, come on, marketing people, they're clueless, they're not scientists. She says, no, 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 you should check it out. You should check it out. So I did. So I applied for a job that was called product technical support, technical marketing. Um, and they said, "Yeah, you'd be great." And I loved it. And because I do, I would go to conferences before I made this transition to present papers and posters. And I really like doing that. I enjoy communicating what we've been working on to people and seeing them get excited and so forth. And I went into marketing and I actually really enjoyed it. However, and another famous line from my wife, marketing is a gateway drug to sales. Because marketing is the gateway drug to sales. Because later on, when I was coming back from overseas, I thought I was going to be taking over the head of marketing at this company, and my the CEO and my boss, the CRO, said, "No, we'd like you to go to sales." And I said, "Ha ha ha, that's all very fun, but she's like, there, that's really funny." I said, "No, no, no, we really think this would be a good move for me." I'm like, sales, but salespeople, they're it's I couldn't even articulate how evil those people had to be. Well, long story short, I ended up in sales, and to a certain degree, guess what? We all are. Because my claim is, and I think Daniel Pink said this best, the only difference between sales and persuasion is the exchange of money.
Yeah. Well, you're trying to convince your kids when they're young go to bed. You're trying to convince your kids to go to school. You're trying to convince your wife to think, to whether you should go grocery shop, whatever it is, there's always something kind of convincing going on in sales at a very low level or high level in your life every day. Clients, obviously with me and with family and everything else. So you're right. You are doing exchange of goods, sometimes with money and sometimes without.
Yeah, exactly that.
That is great. I tell you, this time has gone by the fastest of anybody I've ever spoken to. The conversations have flown so smooth, and I'm so glad you joined us. I know our listeners are going to love this, but do you want to promote anything you're doing or talk about any programs you're part of or anything promotional wise? Speaking of sales,
Of course, absolutely. So if you're looking to improve discovery skills or software demonstration skills, we have programs, workshops, other different types of offerings at greatdemo.com. If you're interested in just exploring things on your own, I would recommend you get a copy of Great Demo, third edition, uh, Doing Discovery, both of which are available on Amazon. If you want some fun examples of real life stories, I think all but one or two in Suspending Disbelief are actually true stories. Grab a copy of my most recent book, just published a few months back, called Suspending Disbelief, a collection of sales, pre-sales, and marketing stories and lessons learned. You will be glad you did. All three books are on Amazon in both Kindle and paperback format, and I'm working on the audiobook format for Suspending Disbelief.
can they search your name under whether it's Audible or from Amazon, like to search your name as the author, or do they have to search the name of the book only?
So you could do it either way. There is another Peter Cohan out there who is also an author. He and I actually know one another and have recommended things back and forth for people. I'm Peter E. Cohan.
I see that in the name there. Okay.
Yeah, I forgot what his middle initial is. Maybe C. In any case, but yeah, Great Demo is probably the easiest way to find Great Demo. Doing Discovery, same way. Suspending Disbelief, same way. Those would be the fastest way.
And is it greatdemo.com? Is that the actual website to reach you?
That's correct. Yep, greatdemo.com. And if anybody wants to reach out to me, I'm more than happy to have conversations, to try to help out. particularly if you have read one or more of the books and you have questions or you want to discuss specific situation, feel free to reach out. I'm at pcohan, PCOHAN at greatdemo.com.
Okay, great. I mean, people know how to reach you, what you do. Your stories have been absolutely riveting and exciting. Like I said, this is the fastest this time has ever gone before. I just feel like it's been a snap of a finger. We've been on this for almost an hour and a half now. I'm really, really excited to have you on as a guest. Thank you.
Our pleasure was truly mine.
I appreciate it. And thank you, everybody listening. And I'll see you on the next podcast. Have a great day.
Well, thank you.
Behind Closed Books podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.